Hi guys, I wanted to do a different video today. I'm doing a tutorial on how to do watercolor flowers. Really easy, basic, entry-level flowers anybody can do at home. So if you have some paints, get them out, take a look, and join me. Okay, so let me start out by showing you some of my materials and how I have my desk set up. I've got a single piece of paper down in front of me. It is from Arches. I don't know exactly how to say it. It is hot press, which means it has a smoother finish. Here, I'll show you here. I'm at the end of my pad on that one, but it's good stuff. And then I've got water here. You want at least 2 cups of water if you can. That way when you're mixing different shades of colors, warms and cools especially, you're not gonna muddy them up and reduce their intensity. So you wanna, I have 3, a little bit extra. I've got my paint palette over here. Right here, it's got 6 little wells, and that's because I have 3 colors today. I picked out 2 warm colors, ice pink and tangerine, and then I have slate blue, and these are Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiant Concentrated Watercolor Inks. You want to give them a good shake. I've already shaken them. When they sit for a while, you can see they have sediment build up on the bottom, so you just want to get rid of that, shake them up really good. So let me show you how I like to set up. Here, I'll move this off to the side so you can see a little bit better. I'm gonna do, let's say 1, 2, 1, 2. We're not doing a lot today. It's a small tutorial, so we don't need a whole lot of ink. And I'll show you why I am putting the same color in 2 different drops, or 2 different wells. It's because I'm going to add water to one side for each color and make a ice pink. Is actually really diluted already. I probably don't need to do that. I won't add very much water to it. And then I just add some water and I build up a lighter shade. I'll just do a little bit there because it's already very transparent. This just gives me a light and a dark version of each of the colors that I'm working with. Okay. Now that I have my colors mixed, I want to show you what they look like on paper. And this is something that you can do if you're not familiar with the color, if you're using new paints or paints you haven't used in a while and you don't quite remember. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of testing over here so you can kind of see where things are at. Now I'm gonna designate my water, and then I'm gonna add a little water. You can kind of see how light it gets. Okay, let's try another color. Got my brush nice and clean. Oh, I didn't mention in my setup discussion earlier, you want to have some paper towel handy, maybe 1 or 2 pieces, a piece to clean your brushes off on, and then another piece that you can rip and use to soak up water on your painting. That's really good. Now I want to show you the concentrated version of this color so you can see the difference. I'm going to dry off my brush a little bit better. All right, you can see sort of the difference between the light and dark. Let's go over to another color, the light pink. All right, that's super light. And then the concentrated, all right, you can see sort of the difference there. Cleaning off my brush again. I'll try to bring it a little closer, maybe you can see the water. And blue, so you know what you're working with. Here's my 3rd water jug. And the concentrated version, ooh, it's nice and dark. So looks like you've got the most contrast there. With our paints mixed, we're ready to go. So I'm gonna show you flower number 1. It's really simple. I'm gonna start out with a light tone, gonna mix it, water it down a little bit more. It's a 4 petal flower. Very watered down. In fact, super transparent, but that's okay. We like it nice and watery. I'm leaving a little open space in the middle of the flower. That's gonna be where I add a little pop color. Okay, I haven't filled in the leaves completely. You see a little bit of white paper peeking through. That's part of the loose, messy style. Now I'm gonna take some of the pink. I load it up on my brush, kind of touch it in a couple places, let the water mix around. I'm gonna go back in for the concentrated tangerine and just start adding it to that empty spot right in the middle of the flower until it starts to bleed. Take a look, evaluate, is there enough color in your flower? I'm gonna add a little bit more of the diluted tangerine to one. Oh, I mixed it around a little bit, got the water moving. I'm gonna take a little piece of my paper towel that I mentioned, soak it up just a little in a couple special places. Okay, flower number 1 done. Okay, we're moving on to flower number 2 here. It's gonna be more of a puppy little cloudy rose. Really classic. You're gonna see these in almost everybody's watercolor paintings, especially if you're a beginner. It's really gratifying. We are starting out with the diluted ice pink color this time. And I'm just gonna make sort of a flat, I'm using the side of my brush and I'm just kind of making a flat sort of puffy circle. I'm gonna go back, add a little bit more color. Doesn't have to be even. In fact, I think it's a little bit more interesting if you mix up the color. One thing you can do once you've laid down your color from the paintbrush, clean off your brush a little bit and go back with a little bit of clean water and dab right on top, and that can make some really interesting textures. We're gonna let that dry and we're gonna come back to it to add some detail. So let's move on and start flower number 3. Flower number 3 is really more like a little bunch, a little cluster, think baby's breath, but in pretty colors. So these are good accent flowers to do. And we're gonna start using the blue, our little leaf color. So you're gonna see that third color start to pick up. I'm moving over to a smaller brush. I don't think I mentioned it before, I'm using these brushes from Silver. They came in a pack of 3, I got them on Amazon. I think they're silk painting brushes, but they're amazing for watercolor. They've got great reviews, go check it out. So these are a little bit smaller. Let's start, we're gonna mix up a couple colors here. So we're doing really loose, they don't have to be exact. Some can have some white spacing around. You're using gently the tip of your brush. Some can be a little bit more filled in. You can go back and add more color if they start to get transparent. Maybe some flowers are touching each other. I'm gonna dip into the orange a little bit and get a little bit going over here. Multicolor bunch. Maybe I have some up at the top, coming off on the side. I'm gonna clean off my brush a little bit. It's still a little bit orange. So I'm getting different tones. And you can see I'm only using 3 colors, but I'm getting light shades and dark shades. And I haven't even used my concentrated well. So you can really get a lot more range. Just depends on how much water you add. Okay, I'm gonna go back into pink. Okay, I'm not making an exact circle shape out of this. You want it to be a little bit uneven and organic. Maybe some coming off, straying from the flock over here. Okay, while it's still wet, I'm gonna load up my brush with the concentrated, do just a drop of concentrated orange in a couple of spots, mixing it with the pink, mixing it with the light orange. Just getting some variation. It almost reminds me of leopard spots. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry. We're gonna come back to it. Let's go back over to flower number 2. So let's move back to flower number 2. My paper is not exactly dry on flower number 2. It's still a little bit damp, but parts of it are starting to dry out a little bit. I'm gonna go back with the concentrated ice pink, and I'm gonna start kind of just adding, I'm using my small thin brush. It's a size number 4. and kind of going around the edges, giving it a little bit of a outline. And then I'm going to do the same thing kind of in the middle. Don't make it a bullseye. You want to make it a little uneven. Nature tends to be asymmetrical, at least in color a little bit. Maybe add a touch of orange. Get some distortion in it. Okay, I'm still going to be adding more detail as we go. Don't want it too wet. This is a matter of taste, but I'm showing you what my process is. And then you change it up as you go. You see how you like it. But if you've never done it before, give this a try, and then you can modify as you get to know what you like. Okay, second layer is done. Let's move back on. So now we can go back and wrap up flower number 3. I'm dipping into my blue color here. I'm starting with my diluted version. Then I'm going to go back and add some range with my concentrated. Using my smallest brush. This one's not fully dry either. It's starting to dry out, but I like it when it's a little bit wet because you can see what starts to happen on the page with the colors mixing together. And I'm just kind of going up like a little tree with little branches connecting in between. And then maybe I draw a little leaf. Draw in the center of this flower maybe. This is also a matter of taste. Now I'm picking up the concentrated version of slate blue, and I'm just going to touch it down in some places to add some range. Maybe I even give a real leaf up here. One going off to the side. I'm loving what's happening there in the middle of that. Okay, now we have our little pretty bouquet done. Moving on to our 4th flower. This one's gonna have more of a daisy shape. Just to give our page some color variety, this one's gonna have some blue petals because it doesn't have to be real. It just has to be fun. All right, so that one has a bit of a point. I don't want the point. I want more of a rounded edge on this one. I have to go really light with the tip of my brush. And it can have maybe as few as 5 petals. You can definitely do more than that. I'm gonna give it some more petals than that. I don't know how many, I don't know what actual flower this is from nature or a garden. It's gonna be from my imagination. I'm leaving space in the middle. That's where I'm gonna add a different color. When it's semi-dry, I want to do a little bit of mixing, so I'm not going to wait till it's completely dry, although you can. It's going to have a different effect when you do that. But I want some of that organic, tie-dye color mixing. That's why I like using the watercolor inks. They're a little bit more wet. Going back in, I'm using the diluted version. It's a little bit flat and even right now. I'm going to change that. I have plenty of time while the page is still wet. Okay, and then I'm just kind of tweaking with the tip of my brush, pulling in a more even centered texture. Okay, I'm cleaning my brush, setting it down, drying it off, picking up the smaller brush and getting more of that diluted blue. I'm sorry, the concentrated blue. Yeah, the really dark slate. Look at that. Now I'm going back in with just clean water, and I'm adding some water drops, which sort of push the paint away from its original spot and give you some nice ripple textures. There you go, you can see it in that one better. It's also just putting more water in the flower so that this will start to bleed and blend, especially if you kind of move your page around. You gotta be careful because if it drips outside of the flower shape that you've painted, you've ruined it. So be careful experimenting with moving your page around. Make sure it's not too wet, or then you're gonna have water going where you don't want it. All right, we're gonna let that dry up a little bit. We'll come back to that. Let's move on to flower number 5. All right, the next flower is still sort of an accent flower. You can scale it up and make it a feature flower. Right now we're gonna keep it small, but it's more of a side angle. You can see a lot of these are pretty flat head-on flowers, so this one's a little bit different. And I'm going to start with the concentrated color and then work my way out to the diluted tones. So on this little guy, sort of like a side angle rosebud, I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna make sort of like a moon shape, kind of one edge is sort of flat and the other one is rounded. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a sort of like a hedgehog, a little spiky back top, and then I'm going to clean off my brush a little bit. It doesn't have to be super clean, but get it mostly with water. And from there, I'm gonna tease out the edge of it and give it a lighter color up on top. And it's kind of connected down here at the bottom left corner. And from there, I'm gonna pick up some of that diluted color. I'm gonna go a little bit below it and stroke away from me towards the flower up here. Kind of curve it around like this. Pick up some more color. So you can see I left some space in between the bottom of, I'm gonna call it a hedgehog, and where I'm drawing these new petals. And I'm doing soft little, like, they remind me of, this is gonna be funny, this is like I'm teaching dance and we're hopping over the mountains, so everything kind of is gonna get an analogy, but sort of flame shaped strokes up around. And while I have a bunch of water on the page, I'm gonna go back in with different colors. Maybe my concentrated pink. Give it a little bit of variation. And maybe with that color, I'm gonna bring some bottom petals. So we're drawing dimensions and layers. You've started with the center, which is gonna be the most pungent color, the darkest color. Then we're drawing in the backside, that's gonna be furthest away from us. We come in with the front petals that go up, and then we finish with the front petals that sort of go down. And from there, you can just add concentrated color as you like. Maybe a touch of it down here, go back in where we started. And on this one, I'm gonna add a little bit of greenery. Pick up my blue. Give it a stem. Maybe a couple leaves. Small ones that you make with light stroking. You may find it takes a little bit of practice to do this, but it'll come in time. Good brushes help, good paper helps, so I'll link everything that I'm using if you want to try those out. But I think that's about it for this little guy. All right, there you go, little side bud. Now I'm gonna go back into my daisy-esque flower while it's dried up but still a little bit wet in the center, especially down towards the bottom. I can see I've got a clean brush, mostly clean brush. I'm gonna go back in. I'm picking up the lighter version of my ice pink, laying down the more transparent color first. Get it in there, and from there I'm going to add, actually maybe I'll dry it out a little bit. There's quite a lot. If you're adding paint to too much water, it won't have much of effect, and it's going to be really too diluted, or it's not going to stick to the paper. It's going to kind of wash away. So you can always soak up water, and then you can always re-add it. It's really a game, an experimental game. Now that I've got a base light pink, let's add real small dots of the concentrated pink. uneven. I suggest not doing it symmetrically if perfection is your goal. I think what's great about this is it's anti-perfection. I mean, I know perfectionist artists who are terrified to do this, and I'm far from a perfectionist, and that's what I embrace about it. So really just embrace the chaos of it. Going back in with the concentrated orange, really small drops. They still kind of expand and turn huge, but I'm liking how that turns out. In fact, I want to bleed a little bit onto the blue. So I touched it a little bit because it was dry enough that it wasn't going in. There's my doorbell, okay. Okay, now I am going back to flower number 2. You can tell it's sort of just like a cute little colorful little puff ball on the page. Needs a little bit more detail. Now that it's completely dry really, so I am going in with, first I'm gonna start out with my diluted orange. It's Tangerine. And I'm gonna draw kind of a little uneven center. I've got my medium-sized brush, and I'm just gonna sort of do a couple uneven strokes around the outside. Maybe dilute the color a little bit so I get a little range. Maybe I don't want it exactly that strong, even though it's the diluted version. All right. I've put a little bit of water back down on it so it's no longer dry anymore. And now I'm going in with my concentrated tangerine, and I'm going to add a couple strokes just for dimension and to give it a little bit of edge and contrast. This is really not anatomically correct. I don't know the anatomy of a rose perfectly. You're just kind of, again, sort of think about like a bullseye or a target, but you're breaking it up and you're making it more uneven. So that's kind of how I think about it. You're sort of drawing a spiral, but not everything is going to connect and be symmetrical. And there we go. I mean, that's basically your finished rose. We can move on to flower number, 6. All right. Okay, flower number 6. It's another 2-step flower. You can see some of these you can kind of paint in one step, and then others you let sort of dry or half dry, and then you come back to them. This allows you to work your way around on a page. It's kind of useful actually. You can sort of build up some layers, paint one flower, come back, go to a different one, come back, finish it up. That's how I've found it's most helpful to work. So for the next one, I'm going to do 3 petals. So we're painting the front side. I'm starting with the lighter shade of whatever color you want to make it. I'm doing the ice pink here, and I'm gonna start from like a rounded base, and I'm gonna do 3 pointy petals going in different directions. I think I might need more pink on here. They connect down here at the bottom. They can be a little bit thicker. Made them kind of thin to start with. All right, I might need to mix a little bit more pink. This is very light and transparent. There we go. I pulled in just a little bit of the concentrated pink, and I'm pushing it around the wet shape on the page. Again, it doesn't have to be even. You want it to be a little uneven, in my opinion. All right. Now with that wet, I'm still using my size 8 medium brush. I'm gonna go into my slate blue, and I'm gonna draw a little base to the flower. Maybe stop too much spreading from happening. I want to dry that up a little bit. Oh no! Whoops. Okay, be careful of that. Try not to do that. We're going to move around that. That's okay. You draw the stem going down. Real light. Don't press too hard. And then I'm going to draw a couple leaves coming up. So I meet the base of my stem, and I press down on my brush, and I give it a little flick, and I've drawn half of my leaf. I'm going back really light with the tip of my brush, and I press it down and then try to do the flick, but you meet up with the same point. And it's okay that the color is not that strong to begin with. You can add more. But at least it gives you the outline of your shape. Okay. And maybe make one more leaf. Let's do one going this way. So that's the great thing about the way these round brushes are shaped. You've got a nice pointy end, but if you press down, you can get sort of a nice thick broad stroke. So I'm going back over it, building up my color, leaving a little bit of white space of the paper color in the middle. Okay, still got a little bit of spreading up here. I'm gonna blot that out. I don't mind it, I just don't want it to get out of control. Okay, we're gonna let that dry up a little bit and we're gonna come back and we're gonna paint the back side of that flower. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so pro tip, don't do what I just did and end up with a big splattery mess on your page when you have to put your brush down and pick up some paper towel to blot your page. Instead of passing the brush from one hand to the other, as I did, make sure you put your brush down, gently move it out of the way. And the same goes for when you are maybe you're painting and you've decided you've run out of color, you need to shake it up and put a little bit more in your palette. Move your page off to the side, just because when you use these little eyedroppers, sometimes a little bit can come out and you don't want it to reach over and end up on your page, ruining, you know, your hard painted efforts. So, all right, back to the painting. All right, we're moving on to flower number 7, which is another cluster. It's similar to these branchy ones, but we're gonna make it more cloudy. I mean, shape of a cloud, not the color of a cloud. A little bit more amorphous. So for this one, I'm gonna use my light tangerine, and I'm gonna really use my water. So this one, think about filling things in a little bit more than we did here, and the shapes can be, I'm gonna go a little bit bigger than our previous one, our previous floral mix cluster, right? So these are accent flowers, and I'm building up some that have more transparent petals. Let's see, I'm gonna use a little bit of pink over here. I'm using my medium-sized brush, so it's not tiny, but I'm being really loose and messy. I'm not thinking too hard about it. I'm gonna go back in with my concentrated. I'm gonna start adding little tones that give it dimension, a little bit of contrast, maybe in the center of some flowers, maybe as petals popping out. Let's do the same with our concentrated ice pink, getting some of that in here. All right, these are great filler textures. So when you're doing a composition, or even if you're creating sort of clip art like this that you're gonna compose on the computer, just gives you a variety of shapes and filler. Again, I'm not making an exact circle shape. You want it to be realistic. So maybe think about how countries are shaped on a map. You want to be a little bit irregular. From there, I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush and start adding in some blue leaves, just little flicks here and there. So this is really kind of similar to the one that we did earlier. This one, that's what I'm talking about. We're going a little bit bigger, we're going a little bit fluffier and looser with our shapes. I think it's less branchy, I guess, than the first one that I'm doing. The first one that we did has more emphasis on the branch and the stems. This one is a little bit more puffy. And I think it has an emphasis on the soft flowers. And you can just kind of keep going with that until you think it's the right size. Maybe you want to fill some of it in a little bit more, which it can have that blue color. It's less about branches and it's kind of more about the fill. Really light. See, it's diluted blue. I'm really almost picking it up more from where it's already down on the page. It's hardly on the brush anymore. If you mix blue and orange together on the page, you're going to end up with some browniness, which may not be what you're going for, but here it's so transparent, it's really not doing that. The colors are pretty much staying true. All right, I like how that's looking. Let's move on. Okay, let's move on to flower number 8. This is a little bit like our daisy. Let's use pink for this one. Let's start out with the light shade. We're gonna start light, build up to a darker color. It's like the daisy. Let's make it a little bit bigger, a little wider. Let's make the fewer leaves, maybe a little bit bumpier leaves, almost like they have like a little scalloped edge on the edge of the leaves. I'm gonna start almost, yeah, heart-shaped, I guess, instead of scalloped. They almost have heart-shaped. So it's almost like a little heart. It's got a teardrop edge to it on one side. It doesn't have to be super pointy, and it's very light right now. I'm gonna move around to the next one. I'm leaving space in the middle where I'm gonna put an alternate color. It's kind of starting at the edge, the back edge, and working my way sort of towards that center of the flower. He's got a little swing to it too. It's not completely flat and symmetrical. I want to give it sort of a little dimensionality. So I'm going to make the petals shorter on this side and longer on this side. I'm going to do one last petal right over here. We still have a light color. Okay, so from there, while these are still wet, let's pick up a little of the darker pink and dab in the center. Give it a little bit of a gradient ombre effect from the center out. Now I'm just pushing water around the page. I'm redistributing a little bit because the edge of the petals are almost dry almost. So the center is where all the water is still. There we go. So it's got a little tie-dye effect. All right. Maybe now I want to add some drops of water. Maybe I want some of those drops to be just ever so slightly tinted. Let's do them off to the side. Okay, all right, I'm gonna do the center of this one while it's still wet. Let's go with the diluted tangerine, and I'm just kind of drawing out loose shapes, leaving some white space. I'm not drawing like a big flat dot in the middle of it. I'm not smearing around even color exactly. All right, you can see it touch that petal and it's starting to head in there. The more you connect it and the more wet the page is, the more everything is going to bleed. If it's bleeding too much for your liking, just pick up a little paper and blot it, which I'm going to do just in the center. All right, and then with my small brush, maybe I've washed my small brush in the watery blue, and then I'm gonna dab it just tiny bit in the dark blue. I'm giving him a little speckle. All right, so I've blotted out the center of it so that it's not gonna bleed too much. Oh, I see you, I'm gonna blot you. There we go. If you see it running too much, just add paper. All right, next flower done. Let's move on. All right, guys, stay with me here. We're almost there. We're almost done. I'm going back and I'm gonna add the back petals to this flower. What's he, number 6, flower number 6. For this one, let's give it the light tangerine color in the back. So I wanna make sure that I'm not setting my hand down on any wet part of the page. My leaves, this whole flower is dry. I gotta watch out for these wet spots over here on this little cluster. But what I'm gonna do is I'm mostly painting with water here, and I'm gonna take my brush and I'm not coloring on top of the pink petals, but I'm gonna fill in some back petals. All right, so they're kind of pointy at one end, and then it's gonna point down to the center of the flower. Maybe I'm gonna do one over here that's peeking out the back. So it's really hard for you guys to see right now because I'm painting and I'm basically painting with dirty water at this point. If my water were clean, you'd have an even harder time seeing it. But I'm gonna add more layers of pigment. But right now, I'm gonna keep it kind of watery. That one's a little dark, so I'm adding water to lighten it up. And then moving on to the next petal. Ooh, I'm in tight quarters here, but that's okay. Fitting 10 unique flower shapes on one page. You can do it. Okay, so now I've painted down my shape for the back petals. I'm gonna go back in with tangerine. First I'm using still the diluted tangerine. And I'm just starting down at the center, I'm sorry, at the bottom edge of those petals. It gives it some shadow and dimension. It's gonna look a little bit more realistic if the lightest shade is up at the top of the petal and it's darker down at the center. Cleaning off my brush, and now I'm just kind of redistributing the color a little bit, blending it with my brush so that it's not so choppy where the color starts and stops. Okay, not too bad. Now I might take a smaller brush. I'm gonna go back in with the concentrated tangerine, and I'm just building it up even more. I'm not completely coloring it in like with a marker. I'm sort of just dabbing little dots. And they fade as they go up. So sort of they're concentrated down at the bottom. All right, I'm kind of liking this. All right, he's a little wonky in shape, but you can kind of see technique-wise, you're starting out with sort of the light pink as the outside of the flower, and then you're waiting for that to dry, and you're starting with a slightly different tone, either a dustier pink or the light orange in this case, and you're building out dark shades from what would be the inside center of the flower. I'm really loving how the back colors are, but I kind of want a little bit more definition on the front that is dry. So I'm gonna take this opportunity, clean off my brush. I'm going back in with I'm gonna mix a little bit. So it's not as diluted, but it's not as concentrated. It's kind of in between. Well, let's just draw some lines. Some shadow, or maybe they're like striations on the petal. Put them up here at the top. I'm making sure not to mix my new pink color with the orange that I've just laid down because I don't want them to blend. I want them to be like separate layers. So just try not to touch them together. All right, that's good enough. I like it. All right, so that one's done. Let's move on to our last two flowers. Okay, last two flowers. Let's make this one a blue one. This one is gonna be side facing like that, but the petals are gonna go down a little bit. So I'm starting off with my diluted blue. And let's see, I kind of want to make a little, let's call that a little seagull shape. And then I'm gonna go off to the side and sort of make a pretty little petal. It goes down in that direction. Give it a little bit more ink. Let's go down here. These ones have sort of that heart-shaped petal edge too. I don't have to leave anything in the center because this empty, the seagull shape is gonna be the center of my flower. All right, so I'm sort of making a little teardrop loop. And over here is my last one. Nice and easy. I'm adding some water. Okay, I'm gonna make the petals a little bigger. Those didn't end up being very teardroppy, but that's okay. It's more irregular this way. I got one kind of teardroppy one. I like that. All right. Okay, so while that one is starting to dry, let's move on to flower number 10. All right, this is the bad daddy of the gang. He's a little bit different. It's a little more advanced, but let's give it a try. Let's see. I mean, you did all these other ones. Let's give this one a try. So this is a little bit more of a centerpiece flower. If you practice, work up to this. I like to set down the centerpiece flowers first on a page when I'm doing a floral composition, but this is practice, this is clip art, so we're moving on to him last. For this one, I'm gonna start out without too much water on my brush. I'm gonna go in and load up the concentrated blue, and I'm gonna do 3 messy strokes, 3 petals going upward, kind of like a W almost, but they're gonna connect down at the bottom. So I'm gonna go right here sort of in the center of this last space that I have, and I'm gonna do petal up, nice and messy. I mean, this almost feels more messy than some of the other ones. It's also inkier, darker, and then they kind of connect down here. All right, I like that. Okay, I'm gonna wash off my brush a little bit, add a little bit more water to it, but dilute it a little bit. And then from here, I'm gonna go up. And then I'm getting really messy with my brush. I'm just kind of, which means I'm not making perfect petals. I'm sort of pressing down on one side. You can see it's sort of angled. It's not flat. And then I'm going to come down here. Maybe round it up a little bit more. Add some more water. Okay. And then for here, maybe get a little bit more of the dark blue. Give it a punch. All right, so now I've got more water on my brush than paint, and as I lay down these leaves, it's sort of pulling ink away from the concentrated leaves where we started. Okay, I'm sort of running out of room here on my page, but you can see the shape. So these leaves go behind, these leaves jut out in front. I'm coming back in with my darker, and I'm just loading up the tip of my brush and laying it down, creating a little shadow on this front petal. Okay, now while I've got my brush loaded up, I might kind of do the same here, give it a little bit more dimensionality while that one's still wet. In fact, I'm going to take this whole leaf and make it a little bit darker. Okay. All right, so we want this one to dry. I'm going to speed up the process, blot this guy a little bit. All right, for the center of this flower, let's go light pink. diluted, and we're just gonna kind of give him a little center. A pretty pink center pointing up. Drop some darker pink in there. And maybe I'll do that diluted orange and just off the edge where it's like barely, not even touching. Maybe it touches a little bit. There we go. All right, so two-tone center on that flower. I'm liking how that's turning out. I think while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm gonna add a little bit more dimension. Let's go back with some blue. Be careful if you're gonna set the heel of your hand down, not to do anywhere wet. Don't want to set your hand in wet paint. I am just drawing a little bit more dimension onto this flat blue leaf. A little bit of an outline and a line in the center. Let's do it here too, but let's not make it completely even and symmetrical. Maybe add a little touch of the dark. Ooh, too much dark. Maybe we make the center stem a little darker so it pops a little bit. Okay, I like that. Now I'm kind of gonna do the same thing over here. Just add a little touch of light, thin, delicate, but dark blue lines. I don't mean light blue. Okay, I'm gonna go back down here and do the same thing over here. Okay, I'm liking how that's turning out. All right, we're basically almost done. I think on this pretty last blue flower, I'm gonna go back in. I'm gonna lay down some, you know what, I might actually use my smallest brush just so I can be more precise and surgical. Oh, see, that's just clumsiness right there. I don't have any tips for you there. Try not to be clumsy. Okay, so let's lay down some color in the middle. So you can't see it because it's very clear water, but I'm painting in the white space, but I'm gonna try not to touch the blue as much as possible. It's not perfect, and you know, maybe in a perfect world I would wait a little longer, but for the purpose of this tutorial, we can deal with a little bit of bleeding, but I'm going sort of in the middle of the white space. If I touch the concentrated dark blue, it's gonna explode, it's gonna start spreading everywhere. Same thing with the light blue up at the top. So I'm kind of creating a little island in the middle of the ocean as much as I can. Let's go Tangerine, the diluted Tangerine. And this is gonna work similar to this other open dimensional flower where the most concentrated darkest tones of color should be sort of down where the base center of the flower would be. Shading wise, that just gives it a more realistic look when it comes to depth. So start out with light concentrated color because you can always add, start out with light diluted color because you can add, if you put concentrated down on the page, you might be able to lift a little bit of it, but you really can't undo. Now I'm going back in with the concentrated Tangerine. And there you go. I mean, you can add a little bit more level to the blue if you need it. Give it some dimensionality. But that's basically it. Practice makes perfect, but this will give you a range. If you start out, I mean, this is really like a vocabulary. You practice, you build your flowers, you build your shapes. I mean, I could sit here and take one of these flowers and I could do a whole page with 10 more drawings of that same one flower in as many shapes and angles as possible. But this is enough to give you a good start. Different shapes to work with. You can lay it down flat on a page like this where you're almost drawing clip art and nothing touches. You can scan it in, you can rearrange it on your computer into a beautiful print or stationery, whatever you want to do. But once you practice enough at this, then you can start building compositions. And that takes time, or it doesn't. Maybe give it a try. Maybe you're a natural and you're better at it than you thought you would be. But all in all, it's just this is sort of my process and how I like to work, and in a future video I'm going to scan this in, I'm going to clean it up and turn it into assets, and I can show you how I would make this into a beautiful floral print that I would put on a tea towel or a woman's dress or, you know, a face mask. So thanks for joining me here today. I hope you've learned something. I hope you give it a try. Give me a shout out in the comments below. Let me know if you liked it, what you thought was helpful. If you have any tips for me, maybe you do. Maybe you're even better at this. Let me know what you think. Thanks for joining me. Bye. And here is where I thank my amazing Patreon subscribers. Behold their beautiful names, for their support helps me in my quest to do more of what I love, helping me bring videos like this to you. So if you like what you see and you've made it all the way to the end of the video, then head over to Patreon and check it out. There you'll find access to cool perks like full-length videos and my Card of the Month Club, which you don't want to miss. But really, any support is a meaningful gesture and will get you your name thrown up at the end of every video like this. So definitely link in the description. Go check that out. Thanks, and see you next time. Bye!